All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into courage. We've got this really cool book here called Unleashing Courage, Your Journey to Fearless Living. And we're going to be like, what's the word? Dissecting it, basically, and figuring out what are the key things that we can all take away and use in our everyday lives. And actually, one of the things that really surprised me reading this book was that courage is not about like not feeling fear at all.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people think that courage is like this absence of fear, but really, it's more like it's the ability to act even when you are afraid.
Hmm.
And the book breaks down courage into kind of three main types. You've got physical courage, and then you've got moral courage, and then you've got emotional courage.
Okay, so is physical courage like a firefighter running into a burning building or something like that?
That's exactly. That's a great example of physical courage because, that takes a lot of bravery.
Yeah.
And then you've got moral courage, which is like when you stand up for what you believe in, even if everyone else is telling you you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then there's emotional courage. And I think that one can be the toughest sometimes. That's things like letting yourself be vulnerable or asking for help when you need it.
Yeah, those can be really hard. So it's like everybody's got their own like battleground where they need to be courageous.
Right.
So what are some examples that maybe our listeners are facing in their own everyday
Oh,
lives?
so many. I mean, it could be something like speaking up in a meeting when you have a different opinion from everyone else. Or it could be, finally starting that creative project you've been putting off for months. It could even be something small, like trying a new recipe that you've always been intimidated by.
I like that. So speaking of being unique and doing your own thing, the book also talks about these things called super strengths. And I was really interested in that
Yeah.
because who doesn't want to discover their own superpowers? So tell me about that.
Yeah, so the book gives this four-step process to kind of help you figure out what your strengths really are.
Mm.
And the first thing you have to do is think about your past successes. So you want to think back to those times when you felt really proud of yourself.
Hmm.
When you were like, yeah, I did that. I rocked it. What were you doing? What kind of skills and qualities were you using in those moments? Because those are clues to your strengths.
So it's like looking back in your past to find those little treasures.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you look back at the successes you've had, and then what?
Then you actually create an inventory of your strengths.
Mm.
You just like write down everything you're good at. It doesn't matter if it seems small or insignificant. You just want to get it all down on paper.
I'm gonna need a big piece of paper for that. But how do you know if like what you're thinking about is actually one of your strengths or not?
Well, that's where feedback comes in. You can talk to people you trust, people who know you well, and ask them what they see as your strengths. But at the end of the day, you also have to trust your own gut because ultimately you know yourself better than anyone else.
Right.
So it's a balance.
Okay, and then the fourth step is trying new things.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Well, you never know what kind of hidden talents or passions you might discover when you step outside your comfort zone. It's really all about expanding your self-awareness.
I was thinking that some people might have limiting beliefs about themselves, like, oh, I'm not creative or I'm not good at math. So this process is really encouraging you to challenge those assumptions.
Totally. And actually, one of the most powerful ways to overcome those limitations is through positive thinking. Now, I know that might sound kind of cheesy, but research has actually shown that positive thinking can have a real impact on your brain. It can help you manage stress. It can help you make better decisions. It's really not just about like feeling good. It's about giving yourself the ability to handle challenges and reach your goals.
Wow. So it's like a superpower in itself.
Right.
So how do we actually do that? How do we go from just like thinking positive thoughts to actually having this unshakable courage? Does the book offer any advice on that?
Oh, for sure. It talks about practicing gratitude
Mm.
and actively challenging those negative thoughts that inevitably pop up and surrounding yourself with positive people. Even just basic things like visualizing yourself succeeding and taking care of your physical health, it can make a big difference.
So like a holistic approach, taking care of your mind and your body.
Exactly. When you feel good physically,
Hmm.
it makes it so much easier to be positive. And you know what? Sometimes a little humor can go a long way. Laughter is seriously like the best antidote to fear. It can literally help you transform tension and anxiety into courage and empowerment.
I love that because I'm a big believer in the power of laughter. But you know what? Let's get real for a second. Because even with the most positive outlook, we're all going to face challenges and setbacks in life. So how do you keep that courage going when things get tough?
Well, persistence is definitely key. But it's not just about like gritting your teeth and pushing through. The book actually gives some really interesting strategies for cultivating true persistence, like setting clear goals so you always know what you're working towards and understanding your why. Like what's the deeper reason you're doing what you're doing? Because that can give you extra motivation when you need it. And then there's this idea of embracing failure as a learning opportunity. It's not a defeat, it's feedback.
So it's all about having that unwavering belief in yourself and your vision,
Yeah.
even when things get messy. So I'm wondering, are there ever times when you need to actually adjust your course
Huh.
to kind of change your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. And that's where embracing different perspectives comes in. We all have our own unique biases and experiences that shape how we see the world. But when we're open to other ways of thinking, we can get a much richer understanding of any situation.
So it's kind of like taking off your blinders and seeing the world in 3D.
Exactly.
I can see how that would help you be more courageous, especially when you're feeling stuck or uncertain.
Yeah, and there's some practical things you can do to cultivate that skill, like really listening to people who have different viewpoints than you do, and seeking out diverse experiences,
Ah,
and even challenging your own assumptions.
that's so important. It's all about stepping outside of that comfort zone and embracing the unknown. And speaking of comfort zones, I think that's where we're headed next.
You got it. But before we jump into that, let's just do a quick recap of what we've talked about so far. We've learned that courage can take different forms, from physical bravery to moral strength and emotional resilience. We've talked about the power of figuring out your unique strengths and cultivating a super positive mindset. And we even touched on how important it is to be persistent and to embrace different perspectives. But the journey doesn't stop there. In part two, we're going to delve into the nitty-gritty of actually stepping outside your comfort zone. We'll explore how to tap into that well of inner strength. And we'll talk about how to make courage a way of life, not just a one-time thing, so stay tuned. So we were just talking about stepping outside your comfort zone, and the book actually has some really good advice on how to do that, because I think a lot of people hear that phrase and they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, like where do I even start?
Right. So the first thing is start small. You don't have to like jump out of a plane or anything. Just do something that pushes you a little bit outside of your usual routine.
Okay, so like what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, it could be something as simple as trying a new food that you've never had before, or taking a different route to work, or even just like striking up a conversation with someone you don't know very well.
Those are good ones. Small, but still a little scary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then as you get more comfortable with those smaller challenges, you can gradually start to increase the intensity. So the next step is to actually set some specific goals. Instead of just saying, I want to be more adventurous, think about what that actually means for you.
Right.
Like maybe you want to try one new activity every month, or maybe you want to finally sign up for that class you've been thinking about taking.
I think having a concrete goal definitely makes it feel more doable.
Yeah, for sure. And here's a really important one. You have to embrace the discomfort, because real growth often happens when you're pushing past those feelings of unease and uncertainty.
Well, that's interesting. I feel like a lot of people try to avoid discomfort at all costs.
Right. But the book is saying that it's actually a necessary part of the process.
So it's like you're not supposed to run away from those feelings, you're supposed to lean into them.
Exactly. It's okay to feel those feelings. Just acknowledge them and then keep moving forward.
It's like that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes, exactly. And you know what else can really help? Having a good support system,
Oh, yeah.
like family mentors, people who believe in you and encourage you to step outside your comfort zone.
So it's like having your own personal cheer squad.
Yeah, exactly. They can remind you of your strengths and help you stay motivated when you're feeling doubtful.
That's so important.
It is. And speaking of motivation, don't forget to celebrate your wins. Every time you successfully step outside your comfort zone, take a moment to acknowledge your courage and give yourself a pat on the back.
I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in the next challenge and forget to appreciate how far you've already come.
Right. Celebrating those small victories is what keeps you moving forward.
You know, that reminds me of that story in the book about the person who quit their job to become an artist. It seemed like such a big risk, but they just took it one step at a time, celebrated each milestone along the way. And eventually, they turned their passion into a successful career.
That's awesome. It's a perfect example of how stepping outside your comfort zone can lead to amazing things.
Hmm.
So now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the role of spirituality in developing courage.
Okay, yeah, we touched on that earlier,
Right.
but I'd love to hear more about it.
So the book emphasizes that spirituality is a very personal journey. It can look different for everyone. It's not necessarily about religion. It's more about connecting with something bigger than yourself, finding meaning and purpose in life,
Yeah.
and tapping into a source of strength that goes beyond your own individual willpower.
It's like that feeling of belonging, like you're part of something larger than yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we actually do that?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to cultivate that connection. One powerful practice is mindfulness. which is all about being present in the moment, observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment, and cultivating a sense of inner peace and clarity.
Yeah, I found that mindfulness practices like meditation have really helped me stay grounded,
Oh, for sure.
especially when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
It's like finding that quiet space inside yourself, even when everything around you is chaotic.
Totally.
It's like training your mind to be more resilient and adaptable. Another important practice is reflecting on your values. What really matters to you in life? What principles guide your actions and decisions? Because when you live in alignment with your values, it creates a sense of purpose that can really fuel your courage.
It's like having a compass that points you in the right direction.
Exactly. And you know what can really amplify that sense of purpose? Connecting with other people who share your
Oh,
values.
yeah.
Whether it's through a faith community or a volunteer organization or just a group of like-minded friends. Having that sense of belonging can provide incredible strength and encouragement.
It's like having a tribe.
It is. And let's not forget about the power of nature. Spending time outdoors, whether it's hiking in the woods or walking along the beach or even just sitting in a park, can be such a profound way to connect with something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree.
There's something about the vastness and beauty of nature that really puts our own worries and fears into perspective.
It's humbling, but also inspiring.
Exactly. And finally, let's talk about gratitude. Taking time each day to appreciate the things you're thankful for, no matter how small, can have a huge impact on your overall well-being.
I love that.
It's like a mental reset button. It shifts your focus from what's lacking to what you already have,
Mm.
and it helps you cultivate a more positive and resilient mindset.
Gratitude is definitely a powerful antidote to fear and negativity.
It is. It's about recognizing the abundance that already exists in your life, even when things are tough. And speaking of tough times, in part 3, we're going to talk about how to actually nurture and strengthen those newfound courage muscles, how to turn those flashes of courage into a way of life, and how to keep that inner fire burning bright, even when the going gets rough.
Okay, so we've talked about all these different aspects of courage. We've talked about facing our fears and finding our strengths and connecting with something bigger than ourselves. But now I'm wondering, how do we actually put all of this into practice? How do we make it stick?
That's a great question. And the book has some really practical advice on that.
Mm.
It all starts with making sure that your goals are aligned with your strengths. Like, think about it this way. If you're like an amazing piano player, you wouldn't set a goal to become a professional swimmer, right?
That makes sense.
So it's about being strategic. Once you've figured out what your strengths are, you want to set goals that help you develop and use those strengths.
Okay, so once we've set those goals,
Right.
is it just a matter of practice, practice, practice?
Practice is definitely important, but it's not just about doing the same thing over and over again. You want to be practicing in a way that challenges you to grow and improve.
So it's like if your strength is communication, you wouldn't just practice talking to your cat. You'd be looking for opportunities to communicate in more challenging situations,
Exactly.
like public speaking or giving presentations.
Yeah. It's about pushing yourself a little bit beyond your comfort zone.
So even with all the practice in the world, we're still going to have setbacks sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So how do we stay motivated when that happens?
Well, one of the best things you can do is celebrate your wins.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in striving for the next goal that we forget to acknowledge all the progress we've already made.
So you're saying we need to give ourselves more credit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And those celebrations don't have to be anything big. It could be something as simple as treating yourself to a nice dinner, or sharing your accomplishment with a friend, or just taking a few minutes to really appreciate how far you've come.
I like that. It's about taking the time to savor those moments of success.
Exactly.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into unleashing courage. We've talked about the different forms of courage, and we've talked about how to find our strengths and step outside our comfort zones. Yeah, and we've even talked about the importance of connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, it's been a really great conversation.
So what would you say is the most important takeaway from all of this?
I think the most important takeaway is that courage is not something you're born with. It's a skill that you can develop.
It's like a muscle that you can strengthen, and
Exactly.
it's a journey that anyone can embark on.
No matter who you are or where you're starting from,
I love that.
the courage you're looking for is already inside you. It's just waiting to be unleashed.
So to all of our listeners out there, go out there and be courageous. And thank you so much for joining us on this journey of self-discovery.